Hi everyone, it is so great to be back with you all today after taking some unintended time off. We've had a virus hit Israel and I got it. So it took me more than a week to feel better, but I am feeling better now and here we are. Also, we are inside my house today because it is pouring rain and it doesn't look like it's going to stop anytime soon. So we're inside. My last long video on red heifers seemed to be your favorite video so far. You guys all posted the best questions in the comments. You sent them to me via email and messenger, sometimes in actual conversations. So I think we're gonna end up creating a Temple Mount playlist on this channel so that I can work answering these questions into my video calendar for everyone. Because I think some of the questions were just excellent and gave me a lot of ideas about what you all are interested in and what would be helpful for you in understanding this issue as it's unfolding in real time, but also as it relates to God's Word. So to further that conversation, I actually wanted to start by talking about the centrality of Temple Mount to the Arab-Israeli conflict and also to this specific Israel-Hamas war, because it is much bigger than the story that I shared last time on the Red Heifers. Now, if you follow my channel, you may have noticed that I posted a short about an article that I just wrote for All Israel News. That article combines some portions of that Red Heifer video along with what we're discussing today. So please do make sure to stop by there and check out the article. It is very helpful to me and All Israel News. And of course, as always, if my channel is helpful, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. In my Red Heifer video, I talked about how the Hamas spokesman, Abu Obadiah, mentioned in his 100-day speech that the bringing of red cows was part of the catalyst for the October 7th massacre. Now, if you've been following the Hamas speeches throughout the war, then you know that actually on October 7th, early that morning, another Hamas spokesman, Mohammed Deif, he actually released in a speech that the reason for the attack was because of the desecration of Al-Aqsa Mosque. Now, Al-Aqsa Mosque is the Black Dome Mosque on Temple Mount, and it's actually the third most sacred site in Islam, because it's considered to be the place, according to the Quranic teaching, where the Prophet Muhammad had his great night journey. During this night journey, what took place was that he rode a donkey from Mecca all the way here to Jerusalem to Temple Mount, where he was then transported into the heavenlies, and he interceded on behalf of the people to lower the amount of times of day that they were going to be required to pray from about like 50 times a day to 5. It's a pretty wild story, and it sounds kind of like what I've read about astral projection. If any of you have a background in New Age, you'll have to let me know what you think about that, because it's a little wild. So anyway, that's how that particular site became to be sacred in Islam, and in the 8th century, that's when they first built a formal mosque. There was some type of worship space there prior to that, but the 8th century is when they first built the mosque, and it's had several different iterations to get to what we know it as today. So on October 7th, when Mohammed Deif made this speech about the desecration on Al-Aqsa Mosque, what he was talking about there is the quiet increase in Jewish prayer that has been happening on the site in recent years. Historically, Jewish and Christian prayer have not been allowed on that site for both security and religious reasons. But with the Netanyahu government in the last few years being the most radically right-wing religious government that we've had in the history of Israel, there has been an increase in prayer at that particular location. Much of it has been led by a right-wing activist named Yehuda Glick, he'll regularly go up on Temple Mount and videotape himself and others praying on the site and post it on social media. He's been doing this for more than 10 years, and in 2013 He was even shot and critically injured for his activism on Temple Mount. But these tensions over Temple Mount aren't new. They go back centuries. But for the sake of today's video, for providing some context for the Arab-Israeli conflict since the formation of the modern state, we're just going to look at what has happened since the late 19-teens and the early 20s, leading up to where we are today, so that you all can get a bigger picture of what this conflict is truly about. And I really want to just throw out a hypothesis there that we are truly in a battle for Temple Mount. After World War I, the region switched hands from Ottoman rule to the British Mandate. The British then signed the Balfour Declaration, calling for the establishment of a homeland for the Jews in their ancestral land. This did, of course, increase Jewish immigration into the land, and in response to all the changes that were happening around them, the Arab Muslims and the Arab Christians got together to form Muslim Christian associations in order to oppose the British and the formation of a Jewish state. At that time, they were not even making a bid for a Palestinian state. They believed in something called Pan-Arabism, and what they really wanted was to be southern Syria. As the Muslim Christian Association continued to meet in their congresses all throughout Israel and codify their political positions, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, Hajj Amin al-Husseini, began to grow in popularity as a leader here in the land. Part of the way that he grew in popularity was by promoting the libel, Al-Aqsa is in danger. Husseini was well convinced that as the Jewish people came in, eventually they would destroy Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome on the Rock and rebuild their temple. So this is really where this issue of wanting to protect Al-Aqsa Mosque got its start in the 1920s. Now, his incitement peaked in 1929 on the Tisha B'Av holiday that commemorates the destruction of the first and second temple. To remember their history, thousands of Jewish people made their way to the western wall of Temple Mount to pray, where they were met with rioting Arabs. For over a week, Jewish settlements suffered pogroms at the hands of Arabs who were incited by Husseini's libel that they were going to destroy Al-Aqsa Mosque. Over 130 Jews were brutally murdered, and today we know this as the riots of 1929. So we're starting to develop a picture here of Temple Mount really being central to the tensions between peoples even before the State of Israel was founded. And again, much of this really was at the influence of the Mufti, Hajj Amin al-Husseini. So we need to talk about who he is a little bit, because his influence on the Middle East is really significant and quite unprecedented, actually. His ideologies have carried out in the conflict even to today. Husseini is known as the father of radical Islam, and that's due to his theological work on the anti-Semitic passages of the Quran. He is the first person in Muslim history to really look at these passages and develop a systematic theology of anti-Semitism based on those writings. Husseini partnered closely with Hassan al-Banna in Egypt, and together they started the Muslim Brotherhood, which is known as the first radical terrorist organization in history. Both of these men were avid Hitler supporters. Al-Banna actually had Hitler's Mein Kampf translated into Arabic so that the Arabic-speaking world would have access to Hitler's genocidal anti-Semitic ideology. The Grand Mufti Husseini, he also had really strong Nazi interest. He was exiled from what was then called Mandate Palestine in 1937 by the British, and eventually made his way to Nazi Berlin, where he was seeking asylum. While he was there, he hosted an Arabic radio show where he promoted his anti-Semitic Islamic theology along with Nazi propaganda to the Arabic-speaking world throughout the Middle East and North Africa. He also worked to recruit Muslims to join the SS Army in Bosnia. Historians have also discovered that Husseini was actually planning to build elimination camps for the Jewish people outside of the Nablus city here in Israel. And this relationship seemed to be mutual. There's evidence that the Nazis actually did support financially the Muslim Brotherhood as early as possibly 1934. So just let it sink in for a moment that the two men who are the founders of Radical Islam and the first ever Radical Islamic terrorist organization were both actively Nazis. The Nazi ideology remains prevalent in Gaza even today. When our IDF first embarked on their ground invasion of Gaza, they found a number of different copies of Mein Kampf in Arabic in people's homes and in schools. The people in Gaza even had a store in Gaza City called Hitler 2. It made the news here one time as it was displaying mannequins that had legit knives in their hands. In the Western world, this is something that we would just consider intolerable, but it's not in Gaza. And I want you all to understand that this ideology runs deep in the population. So what does this have to do with Hamas? Hamas was actually started in 1987 by the Muslim Brotherhood, this Nazi Radical Islamist organization, to be their military wing based in Gaza during the first Intifada. In 1988, Hamas wrote out the Hamas Charter or Covenant that lays out the principles of the organization. There's been a version of it updated in 2017, but the 1988 version of the charter is considered to be one of the most anti-Semitic documents in history. Scholars who know the theological work of Hajj Amin al-Husseini can look at the Hamas Charter and tell that it echoes strongly the teachings of his Nazi radio program. There's three main things that the charter encourages. The first is to annihilate the Jews. The second is that jihad is the only solution and there's no possibility for peaceful conflict resolution. And jihad is also the responsibility of every Muslim. Now, the 2017 version of the Hamas Charter is considered to be moderately toned down, but in practice, they seem to actually be acting on the 1988 version. Jihad and the annihilation of the Jewish people was Hajj Amin al-Husseini's solution for the protection of Al-Aqsa Mosque through the 1920s to 1940s. To sum up his perspective, as long as Israel and the Jewish people exist, the mosque is in danger, so therefore they have to be eliminated. And that is the exact ideology that Hamas holds even today. Now, after the formation of the modern state of Israel, Arab interest shifted a bit more nationalist than religious through the next few decades of looming wars and failed peace plans. But the onset of the Second Intifada brought Temple Mount front and center in the discussion yet again. Most historians mark the start of the Second Intifada on September 28th of the year 2000, the day then Prime Minister Ariel Sharon decided to make a visit to Temple Mount. Even though Sharon's visit was approved by the Palestinian Authority chief, and it happened during normal visiting hours, he was still met by over 1,500 Arab youth protesters who then ended up spending the rest of the day throwing rocks, whether at him or people praying at the Western Wall below Temple Mount. The next day, the Palestinian Liberation Organization's radio station issued a call to all Palestinians to come out and defend Al-Aqsa Mosque. They canceled schools and work in order for everyone to participate in this effort. This effort that was straight out of Hajj Amin al-Husseini's playbook, directly from his Al-Aqsa is in danger libel, ended up launching 4 years of suicide bombings and terrorist attacks that took the lives of 1,053 Israelis. This was the second greatest loss of Israeli civilian life since the War for Independence. That is, until the events of October 7th. Now, the Second Intifada paved way for the Gush Katif disengagement, which was when Israel completely withdrew from Gaza in 2005. And then that in turn allowed for Hamas to rise up according to the vote of the people into the political authority of Gaza. Ever since that day, particularly on October 7th, they've been showing us that they were willing to follow through with the radical Islamic Nazi genocidal teachings of Hajj Amin al-Husseini. Okay, so we've talked about now how it is that Temple Mount has been central in inciting genocidal attacks against the Jewish people since the 1920s. So we need to bring it back full circle to the world's most famous cows, the 5 Red Heifers that arrived in Israel in September of 2022. What's so significant about their arrival is that it can completely change the dynamics of the Jewish presence on Temple Mount, even without the presence of a temple. Right now, for the most part, Jewish and Christian prayer are both prohibited for issues of security, but also religious reasons. In the religious community, prayer on Temple Mount is controversial because of the ritual impurity of the population. They don't know the exact location of where the Holy of Holies was, so for someone who's ritually impure to be walking around Temple Mount praying, they could accidentally desecrate the temple. For that reason, it's often been discouraged by a number of different rabbis in the city. Now, in the case that the Temple Institute is able to carry out this ceremony at Passover and sacrifice the cows in order to create the ash water, what that would do, even without the presence of the temple on the site, is it would remove a number of the religious prohibitions of Jewish prayer on that site. And of course, that would disrupt the status quo of Temple Mount. Now, engaging in activities related to Temple Mount has historically come at a high cost for the Jewish people. If this ceremony does in fact happen before Passover this year, it definitely could shift things both spiritually and geopolitically. So with that in mind, as I know some of you have a lot of anticipation about this, as it seems like it's moving us more in a direction of prophetic fulfillment. I know not everyone in my audience agrees with that, but a good portion of you do. I think that anticipation just needs to be tempered with the reality that it will at some point come at a high cost. So I don't know if it would be something that could happen that day, or if it would be after a season of planning. I really don't know. But the historic record shows us that these things do come at a high cost. And because of that, I think that we all need to meet the situation with sincere and intentional intercession for Israel in the coming weeks as we wait and see what takes place. And if this ceremony goes through, then you all need to continue to pray, like really up the prayer for Israel from that point forward. Because I think it just really could shift things. Because the bringing of the cows did, and as I said in my article, it was one of the biggest geopolitical events of the last decade probably, and much of the world missed it. So thank you for being watchmen on the wall. So thank you all so much for standing with Israel and supporting me and my family. If this was helpful for you, please make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell. That does help my videos make it in the algorithms. It's extremely helpful. Commenting is one of the best things you can do to get the videos in the algorithm, so please do that. And also, on the note of support, I really would like to be able to invest in some better equipment. So my first goal is to get some wireless microphones so we can go on site visits together and I don't have to shout at my phone. But I also eventually would love to get a camera and even be able to make a little bit more of a professional indoor set so I can make videos inside with better lighting and a nicer background on rainy days. I do have my PayPal linked in my bio and I will put it in the show notes. I really would appreciate some help out with this. We are a one Israeli income family right now because I have opted to stay home with the children, and we make a point not to itinerate for support because we are an Israeli family and we feel that it's important for us to be in the economy. But it would really be a blessing if you would be interested in sewing into my YouTube channel in that way. All right, well, again, I thank you all so much for your love and support, and I will see you next video.